what I love to incorporate is how you start your day. So even if you're a parent and you can possibly get up just a little bit before your kiddos do, before you hit the day, just laying in bed, just take a moment, that pause, that breath, the intention, because what you're doing is setting that nervous system. You have the sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic is your fight or flight response. Your parasympathetic response system is your rest and digest. And so cortisol is just one of the stress hormones that can tie in and throw off everything else in your body. A simple way to reverse out before getting into even the deeper, all fancy stuff is breathwork. And there's science that goes into it.
Welcome back, you guys, to another episode of the Beyond the Scale podcast. I'm your host, Mary Katherine, and today I have the great privilege of interviewing Dr. Remina Panjwani, who I met in a women's mastermind, and I met her at a success summit in Dallas a few months ago, and I was so impressed with what she is doing in her field as a physician and just the changes that she has helped making and the advocate that she is for women and their health. So I'm so excited to dive into a bunch of great topics today. But before I do, let me give her a proper introduction and just give you guys a little bit of background about where Dr. Remina comes from and what she's most passionate about. So what Dr. Remina is most passionate about today. So Dr. Remina exemplifies success in juggling the roles of a mom, a veteran, a physician, and an entrepreneur. From humble beginnings as an immigrant family, she was the first to pursue higher education and a medical career. Defying South Asian cultural norms, she joined the Air Force after high school, serving in Iraq. This experience boosted her confidence, and supported by the military, she earned degrees in nutrition and medicine. After completing her internal medicine residency, Dr. Remina confronted the COVID pandemic, exposing flaws in traditional healthcare. This inspired her to establish a concierge, functional medicine, and holistic wellness practice, integrating Eastern and Western medicine to enhance quality of life. Embracing her entrepreneurial spirit, she hosts a podcast, conducts wellness workshops, and serves as a keynote speaker. Dr. Remina believes challenging norms, especially as a female physician, requires courage and takes pride in growing acceptance of her holistic methods. So welcome, Dr. Remina, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Yes, and I'm so excited to just dive into your knowledge and experience on some cool topics that are really trending right now amongst women and health. Before we do that, so you were in the military, then you went to med school, and you were on the path to traditional medicine, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Tell us about what shifted where you were like, okay, I want to take a more holistic approach, use what I've learned, use my schooling, my education, but also do some things a little bit differently, do it your way. Can you talk to us about what sparked that?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the times in this field, anywhere in medicine, we are fighting burnout. And I would say that inspired me in a sense. I wanted to take life into my own hands. I didn't want to be burnt out so early and young in my career, I would say. And I knew that there was another way. There just has to be, because this can't be what medicine is. This isn't what I went into. And instead of letting myself continue on the path of burnout, I used it to inspire me. And I went back, I dug deep during COVID, especially. I dug deep. And as we were coming out of the pandemic, I went searching for the original reason I went into medicine was, of course, to help people, which we do in traditional medicine in the acute setting. As I like to refer to, it's a bandage approach. But I want to truly help people in a holistic, personalized sense, right? Like when you go to the regular traditional medicine, everything is standard and everyone gets standard of care. However, I know we are complex, we're unique, we're also consisting of mind, body, and spirit, right? And everyone should be treated in a personalized approach and in a root cause approach, not just putting more meds, more bandage approaches. So I went in and I came across functional medicine, did extra certification. It was right up my path, where it does not only blend Eastern and Western, but you also don't overlook the lifestyle and the holistic approach itself. So that's how I got into it. And the more I explored, I realized I wanted to just make it my own brand because there's not going to be an ideal job. There's not going to be like an ideal situation. So I might as well just create my own and make the change and inspire not only women, but just people to take health into their own hands.
Hmm. I love that. And while you were talking, I'm curious. I was thinking about some common diseases or conditions in which you have seen over the years where back in the day or when you first started practicing, you may have done the band-aid approach or the bandage approach, as you mentioned, but now practicing more of a holistic approach and the individual method that you use, do you feel like you would have treated some of those things differently?
Oh, absolutely. Take, for instance, like gut health or hormone health, right? Especially as we're women and we're very in tune with the what they call the hot topics. But I would definitely have treated GI symptoms, for instance. Let's take that. So once all the screenings are done and everything acute is ruled out, then typically what traditional medicine will say is here's an antacid, here's a coating medicine, and that's it. However, with these new tools, you really dive into, well, what exactly are you eating, right? Are you eating the highly processed diet that America is so well known for? The wheat, the gluten, the dairy, all that, the sugar, the chocolates and chips and everything, right? Fried foods. And then also, if you look at the stress also contributes. And we'll talk about the cortisol response too, but it really taps into the rest of your body. It causes a inflammatory state, and that also causes an inflammatory state in your gut too, right? So all the symptoms, if you look at stress, the way you sleep, what you're eating, how are you exercising, it really does go back to that. And certain medical food plans, if you say, I would have done a different approach instead of just masking with medicine and saying, just come back in 4 weeks, right? I mean,
Yeah.
sadly, that's what it is. But having additional tools, I can give more to my patients. And then talking about hormones too, right? We as women, especially, we have to go through our hormonal changes every month, right? And I would say, especially as you're getting perimenopausal and even before, to be optimal in your health to thrive, so you could sustain that decade of menopause, perimenopause, you don't have to be miserable, right? If you go to conventional medicine, they'll say, well, it's just normal, it's part of aging, you just have to deal with it. Well, it is a part of aging. However, there are things you could do. For instance, you don't have to be miserable. Body composition, you have a little more control on body composition, on what your hormone balance or imbalances are doing. Also, the symptoms, you don't have to suffer through hot flashes and mood changes and brain fog and decreased libido, your hair falling out, things like that. There's things you could do instead of just being told, well, I'm sorry, it's something you got to deal with, right?
Yeah. Now I want to know like all the things that you can do. But before I ask that question, have you ever been in a situation where like, you're working in a hospital setting and you are working with other physicians and doctors and specialists, and you have seen the way they treated a patient with the traditional medicine, the traditional bandage approach, and you have thought to yourself, ooh, that's not the way I would do it. I wish I could do it another way. Has that ever happened?
I think in the acute hospital setting, it's slightly different because you do need a bandage at times.
Right.
For instance, if someone is having a heart attack, then you definitely want to go ahead and put a bandage on that per se.
Yeah.
But other things, that could have led them to the point, for instance, uncontrolled diabetes, right? Uncontrolled diabetes starts with imbalanced blood sugar in your body. And there's so many triggers. You have to dive deep what the root cause is. But oftenly, people in an outpatient setting, physicians in outpatient setting, you're adjusting the insulin dosage, right? And you're going to say, yeah, lifestyle, but you really don't have the time. You may have 5 minutes, if that, really, with patients. And so with 5 minutes, you really can't dive into lifestyle. You can't really get to root cause in a sustainable action. All you have time to do is say, okay, lifestyle, maybe exercise, stop eating this way, and here, let's adjust your medicine. So in that sense, I would do something differently because now you have the time in a holistic concierge approach and with these tools. Hospital setting, not so much. You just only have time to save lives and bandage and move on. But
Yeah.
that's where the benefit, once you have time to follow up with your doctor, that's where the time where functional medicine can also shine too.
Yeah. So in your practice, what are you finding is the like first problem that you need to address with most of your clients? Is it the nutrition side, or is it their lifestyle in terms of like how active they are, or is it stress, or is it really just an equal combination of all of it?
A little bit of all. However, I tend to draw, of course, a population that is very in tune. Well, I need to take health into my own hands. And a lot of them are entrepreneurs or they're busy, they wear many hats. So it really ties into stress. A lot of it is stress, and that's a common theme we see in the hustle of American life. It is stress. And if you look at other countries, the way that, look at Europe, look at, just all these other countries that have a better work-life balance, a lot of their life expectancy is better. Their daily living, their stress level is more managed and balanced. We as Americans definitely push and overdo in work, and there's not a work-life balance. So I would have to say a lot of it is lifestyle. A lot of it does tie into stress.
It's sad because I feel like we know that. Like so many of us know that. Like I know myself. Like I know when I'm feeling stressed, or even this morning when I'm trying to get my kids out the door. My daughter's at camp. She had to get there early, and I'm, yelling. And then as I'm driving, I'm thinking to myself, oh, I shouldn't have acted like that. I'm getting myself worked up. Why am I doing that? You can almost feel like your blood pressure increasing. And I always joke with my husband. I'm like, thank goodness I do work out every day, because all the stress that I put, myself under, I'm like, good thing I do that. But there's a lot of people that don't. And I think sometimes like it's easy to say I'm stressed out. I need to take care of myself better. I need to slow down, but it's really hard to figure out where to start, like how to start doing that. So what do you typically like have your clients do when you're like, hey, your cortisol levels, like they're showing that they're really high. We do need to get this under control. What's like something tactical that people could start doing?
It honestly starts with small steps, small adjustments, and it slowly becomes a sustainable lifestyle habit. And it's different for everyone. And that's where I want to make sure, of course, I have all the tools and expertise, but when it comes to an individual person, I want to make sure they're able to incorporate it without causing additional stress, right? So if cortisol is already high, you want to do things to bring it down. And there's a lot of simple mechanisms you could do without even spending a whole bunch of money or cutting time out of your day. Of course, the more time you have, there's more deeper we can get into it. But I would say just to start, what I love to incorporate is how you start your day. So even if you're a parent and you can possibly get up just a little bit before your kiddos do, before you hit the day, just laying in bed, just take a moment, that pause, that breath, the intention, because what you're doing is setting that nervous system. You have the sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic is your fight or flight response. Your parasympathetic response system is your rest and digest. And so cortisol is just one of the stress hormones that can tie in and throw off everything else in your body. A simple way to reverse out before getting into even the deeper, all fancy stuff is breath work. And there's science that goes into it. Because if you look at, there was imaging done between a stressed brain and a calmer brain, and you could see how active, as well as you could monitor brain waves, right? So an active stress brain wave is going to be chaotic. A calmer brain wave is going to get into the theta wave, right? And there's ways you could do that. And there's ways you could do that with breath work, because the breath work, what it does, it taps into your nervous system, specifically your vagus nerves. And then slowly you could see, if you take breaths in, like sometimes I will say after you wake up, do breath work in bed. If you're new to it, start with the box method, and we can go through it. There's a box method, but there's also the idea of taking a few seconds in, maybe like 4 or 5 seconds breath in, and then exhale it out 5-6 seconds. And the idea is that resets your nervous system, and you will see physiologically in your brain slow down. So you're already setting that response the minute you wake up. So
Wow.
imagine instead of reaching to your phone, because that phone, when you're exposed to the blue light, will continue setting that cortisol off. However, if you just take a few seconds, literally just a few seconds before you reach for your to-do list, breath work, ground yourself, maybe set the intention in gratitude, and that sets it off. Then even the next step, and we have melatonin, which is the sleep response hormone, and you have the cortisol. If you're already off balance, you don't want to do things that sets it off. So doing this along with hopefully getting exposure to natural light as soon as possible, that sets it off. So the whole point is to set the groundwork for the day and then carry that and then you become more mindful. When you start noticing your brain is going a little bit chaotic, your breath, and you feel the anxiety, the more in tune you get, the more you can tap into that breath. And that's what I love, the breath work. And then go further, right? If you have time to adjust other things in your life, then we take it the next step, right? Then look at what is your exercise regimen. Just like you said, exercise is going to fight that inflammatory response, right? That stress response. And it depends where you are in that cortisol curve, where you are in your life, in your age group, because if you're already stressed and you're doing cardio per se, and you shouldn't be, I'm not saying forever, but just temporarily, you want to balance that cortisol response. So maybe cut back on intense cardio because that will increase it, and do things that will regulate your stress response, like maybe more towards healing, yoga, strength training. I'm not talking about high intensity, but just strength training. You want to build up the muscle. Then, of course, you can look at the quality of sleep. You can look at what types of foods you're eating. You want to give your body nutrition, wholesome foods. And then, of course, look at the relationship, because are you also having toxic relationships or therapeutic, healthy relationships? That taps into that stress response as well. So there's so many aspects you can go to, but I think the key takeaway, the best place people can start if they're especially busy, is that breath work in the morning.
Yeah.
So important, low hanging fruit.
That's so good. I need to do that. I need to get up. I try to get up before my kids, but sometimes they'll get up extra early. You just never know. And so I try to do that, but I find that the mornings where I do that, and like if I sit on my back deck or even just sitting in my living room with the windows, with the sun coming in just for a few minutes, as you mentioned, I am such a better mom in the morning. It's amazing. It's night and day. So I need to do a better job about that. All right, I thought of something.
Sure.
So, like you hear mom rage, like moms, you just get that, like, oh, that anger inside of you and it's like uncontrollable. What is it that causes that? Is it the cortisol that's doing that to us? So, like, say you're yelling at your kid because they haven't picked up their room and you're just saying it over and over and over. And finally, it's like something inside of you just feels like you are just going to explode. And we've all been there. No one's a bad mom listening to this if you've been there, even if it happened today. What is it that causes that? Is it the cortisol?
Oh my gosh, I completely relate, right? I have two little boys, and oh God, like we love our kids, we do, but we're humans too. And honestly, it's not just one straight simple response, because we juggle so much, right? And so we have a threshold. We have a threshold of what we can take in. Even if we're mostly emotionally regulated, there are going to be days where you tip over. So if you look at, maybe there's a sleep debt per se, right? A debt that you're neglecting, not only sleep, but also internal care, because we are moms too, right? And then we have entrepreneurial world and jobs and all that. So as much as you want to balance self-care, sometimes you can't do it. And so then you got that emotional component. And then, yes, the cortisol response. Cortisol does tie into your remainder hormones, your male and female hormones. And being a woman, we are apt to have adjustments throughout the month and, of course, throughout our life.
Yeah.
So if you add in all those components, all of those lifestyle components and triggers, then yes, whatever hormones and chemical messengers, I would like to say, are off, that can put you into a rage. Because you notice, like, sometimes when you're regulated, when you're in balance and emotionally like in tune, you have the self-care, you have a bigger, greater tolerance. But yes, part of it, a simple answer, it could be tied into your imbalance stress response and your hormones. Yes. Simple, but don't let the men take that advantage of us, right? Because there's more to it. There's more to it.
Well, and I'm sure you hear this a lot, but my husband, like if I'm uptight or, if I'm having a day like that, he will always blame it on my hormones. He'll say like, oh, it's almost that time of the month, or is it that time of the month? And I've thought to myself a few times, I'm like, I really don't think it has anything to do with it at this point. But I mean, I know it does.
And think about it, there's also a step further, right? When you think not only cortisol ties into your hormones, like your estrogen, progesterone, but also don't forget the other ones, like your insulin and glucose, right? And so, how does that show up? If your blood sugar, if you're chronically stressed and eventually you're heading towards burnout, your blood sugar is not regulated. So, a simple term, jokingly, you could say hangry, right? So, if you're not having a balanced blood sugar, you may go into a rage too, right? So there's so many factors that tie into it by just even a simple rage, right? So there's more to it. And so that's why it's complex when you start balancing people out. So mom rage is the thing. Now, what is the trigger? It could be anything, right?
Yeah, totally. No, that all makes sense. So when you're working with a client who, let's say they are a mom and they're middle aged and they're experiencing, high cortisol, or maybe their sleep is off, all of the things, what are some good like nutritional practices that you recommend on trying to start regulating that?
Oh, absolutely. Good question. So, of course, the best thing to do is eat as close to whole foods as possible. But I understand sometimes we just can't. We just got to get through the day, put something on the plate for people, right? For our family. But there's ways you could also do that. So, if you can get like a good meal prep program, that's there too. They have so many. You can even go to like, I don't have any stock in it, but like Central Market, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, whatever the case is, they have good, ready, prepped meals. There's meal services, so you could at least have consistent meals throughout the day. But what's important is because if your blood sugar is dropping throughout the day, this isn't the time where you want to restrict your calories and diet. In fact, I would encourage to have small, healthy snacks, nutrient-dense snacks to sustain that blood sugar that are satiating. So, for example, if you realize that you can't even eat, you're on the go, nuts, seeds, right? Nuts and seeds are so good. If you want to have fresh fruit and vegetables, good healthy fats like avocados, right? Or even if you can just do a smoothie on a go, a balanced smoothie, not the ones that are filled with sugar, but balance it out with throw in some greens, veggies, nut butters, nuts, protein powders, bulk up on that good quality protein. And over time, you'll see it will balance out your system. So the key, instead of letting yourself go hungry and forgetting, throw in small snacks because you want to balance out that blood sugar. So don't go too long, several hours, without having a small snack in between.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. And I do feel like many of the women who are trying to lose weight that we see at the gym, like our clients, they are the women that are also saying they're so stressed out. So here they are walking around so stressed out, almost to the burnout stage, but they're also trying to diet. And so I feel like at times when that happens, it's very difficult for them to lose weight.
Oh,
And
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Um, and I also wanted to say too, and that's very common because body composition changes with that stress, right? And it's not just what you eat and how you exercise. And at that point, I would even take it further. This is where another amazing component of where functional medicine shines is the hormone testing. There's one test I really love. It's called Dutch hormone testing. And it's different from conventional medicine because if you go to your regular doctor, we get routine blood work and it takes a snippet of what's going on, like maybe simple hormones, a snippet of what's going on. However, the Dutch test is a urine test as well as a saliva test. So that breaks down the biochemistry of each hormone. So not just progesterone or estrogen, but everything, the metabolic pathway, if you're depleted in certain nutrients, if that's causing one of the root causes, if you don't have the building blocks, then of course you won't be able to produce the hormones. Maybe that's affecting everything as well. Then you add in the salivary test, which is the cortisol test, and that ties into how it's drawing away from your hormones too. So it gives you a broader, bigger picture and tells you exactly where in your pathway you need to balance out. So that may be one of the keys combined with the certain types of food, the certain exercises, and everything else that's going on with one particular person. So it's truly personalized.
Gosh, have you ever had anybody like come to you who maybe they had like one little thing that they were concerned about? Maybe it was because they wanted to check their hormones and their results came back totally different than like what they expected. Like they had really high cortisol, but yet they said they felt fine. Like I'm just wondering if there's any women that are walking around that actually their hormones are not regulated and their cortisol is very high, but they're not really even aware of it yet. And do they reach a point where all of a sudden their body shuts down? Like that's what I'm secretly scared of because I am a very active person. I eat very, very healthy. And most days I do feel fine, but I know that I have high stress. And sometimes I wonder to myself, I'm like, am I going to like reach like a midlife crisis in my 30s and my body just shut down?
Oh, and you bring up a very, very important point there because we all do. We all operate in a way, oh, this is normal. And I'm putting quotes,
Right.
normal, because we've been conditioned to feel like that's normal, but it's not. And so when you look at people, what do you think is normal and what's not? Because we've been trained, we've been conditioned to think this is normal until you realize there is another way. And so, yes, I do have uh, just exactly how you said it, right? Women, men, they come to me and they don't know what the problem is until they're brought awareness. So I think that's
Yeah.
a big key component because we've been so conditioned for the go, go, go.
Yeah, that's interesting because like I have a friend who just the other day she mentioned to me, I haven't been sleeping well. And she was asking me, like, what do you take for sleeping? And I told her, I said, I take magnesium every night and I sleep fine. But there was a period of my life, more so when my kids were a little bit younger. I mean, they're still little, they're 3 and almost 6. But, in that newborn phase, of course, I wasn't sleeping well. And that's what I thought about instantly was that period of time where I wasn't sleeping well. But she's trying all of these things to try to, sleep better at night. And I asked her, I said, well, what are you doing during the day? Like, we got to get down to the root cause. Here I am trying to give her advice, not a physician. And she's just trying to figure all this out. But I think sometimes, us as women, it's like we have this one thing and we think that's the problem, but we're not pulling back the curtain as you do with your patients and looking at all of the other things that could be causing that one symptom.
Exactly. And I usually get an eye-opening response from everyone. Oh, that makes sense. That's why I'm feeling this. And so
Yeah.
it's great to see like that light bulb moment and knowing that there's a way to jump on it before symptoms come up. Just like you said, like, you're quite aware, like you said, you are very cognizant of exercising and what you need to do, but sometimes people aren't. And that's where the light bulb comes in. And that's where the true prevention happens, right? Before symptoms start.
Yeah. I want to ask one more question around like the stress and, the cortisol for women, just because I know it's such a hot topic at the gym right now amongst our clients. So, many women, they'll take anxiety medication or even depression medication, seasonal depression medication. What are your thoughts on the traditional medication for that and a more holistic approach, like some supplements that we could be taking to help reduce our stress levels and calm our nervous system?
That is a very great question because we live in a society where we just want a pill for everything, right? And depression is one of those. There is a lot of data out there. So some of the great institutions out there, you look at Harvard, one of the top Ivy League schools, and they have a really good mental health unit. A lot of research going into that. And what they also brought to light is there's a percentage of responders and non-responders. What does that mean? So it's a really small percentage that respond. And those that do, it is life-saving. However, there's some where it's just not going to work. What they found is lifestyle, and of course with certain types of therapy combined, is not it's successful. And even more, like I saw a stat like 90 something percent more successful in treating the symptoms because you're getting to root cause. And some of those things, it's not just supplements, although it can be, right? So it is looking at, there was one of the papers. So you looked at, I'm not saying just stick to like ketogenic diet, but it just goes to show that highly processed foods and certain diets can worsen symptoms and possibly be root cause. So what they found was the ketogenic diet, originally used for patients with epilepsy, so seizure disorders, that is where they found the benefit. But then you looked further in mood disorders, right? And that's where they saw benefit too, is looking at the highly ultra processed foods that we eat in the States was also one of the contributions, right? Then you look at the other components. If you're not sleeping, and we just like touched on how that affects your cortisol, your melatonin, all that ties into your blood sugar, all that ties into your male and female hormones and everything else, and it causes inflammation. If your body's inflamed, your gut is inflamed, your brain is inflamed. And there's a bi-directional connection there, right? There's a gut-brain axis. And that could also be contributing. So you put all that, exactly, it's fascinating. It's so complex. And now conventional medicine through these Ivy League institutions are bringing forth studies. But the thing is, you don't want to wait at least 20 years for conventional medicine to catch up, right? And that's why people that are awake and aware and know that there is another way do implement these. And there's such profound sustaining effects. It gets them going to be able to do everything they want in their lives and be there for their loved ones, right? And so that ties into the exercise too, doing the right exercises, conditioning your body in that sense. And then, of course, relationships, kind of going to your mind, body, spirit, because it is connected, right? Is again, I referred to the activity of the brain itself, the brain waves, by just sheer practice of mindfulness, breath work, meditation, and doing those things. And it is quite profound. So if you utilize all those tools holistically, truly holistically in the sense, it is much more profound and it's more successful for those people, especially that aren't responding to traditional medicine.
That's so amazing. And I think the problem with all of this is that there's too many people that they want instant results. Like they want to feel happy right away. They don't want to have these feelings and these thoughts anymore. And they want to know, like, how long is it going to take for this pill to work versus doing everything that you just said, changing their nutrition, changing their lifestyle, doing the breath, focusing on their sleep. I know from experience, like when someone tells you all of those things, you're like so overwhelmed by it that you'd rather just take the pill. And that's the problem.
Exactly. And that's part of it, right? Like you still want to, there's so many different types of therapy out there that are beyond conventional. If you look at, especially coming into like ketamine, right? Ketamine is out there. It's been shown to be very successful, but you need to pair it with someone who's trained, possibly trauma therapy trained, right? And then you look at possibly like plant medicine that is beneficial too. You look at the research that's talking about psilocybin possibly, right? And then if you want to look at like supplements, yes, you could tap into like, but you also have to look at where in the cortisol curve you are, right? So I like also looking if you're a good fit for like ashwagandha. There's like cordyceps, like mushrooms. There's, lion's mane, like all those things. And of course, if you're deficient in certain types of nutrients, right? Like certain vitamins, like vitamin D. If you're deficient in vitamin D, that can mask like depression symptoms and a lot of other components. So it really is, it's much more complex than just slapping a pill on it. And it does take work, but I mean, what's the alternative? Just keep living the way you are, trying to go from one pill to another and getting a quick fix, or really getting to root cause and having a sustainable, fulfilling life, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I love your approach. And I'm a firm believer that you should not start anything that you cannot sustain for a lifetime when it comes to your health, unless, it's a condition in which you need to treat right away and hopefully you don't get to the other side of it. But even with my exercise and my nutrition protocol, I never approach anything that is going to be too extreme that I can't stick with, or that's going to maybe harm me in the long run. And so I think that if more people can just get on board with what you're doing, you're going to change so many lives. And it's just so amazing. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And I know that it's only the beginning for you. So I'm excited to see you continue on this journey.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to share this.
Well, Dr. Remina, I really appreciate you being on today. I know our listeners are going to get so much value out of this. Where can everyone find you and learn more about the amazing work you're doing?
Sure. So I'm available on Instagram. I always put out free, good educational content and just follow a little bit about me, get to know me. And I welcome questions. You could DM me. So it's at Remina, Dr. Remina. And then, of course, my website, if you are interested in working with me, that I keep it simple as well, is www.drremina.com. And yeah, just reach out. Questions, how to work with me, anything, I welcome it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Beyond the Skill podcast. As always, make sure to check us out on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and share this episode with all of your friends. Until next time, thanks so much.